Hello everyone, it's Anthony Stockwell from Hadlow College. As part of this video, we're going to go into turfgrass identification. That will be turfgrass identification for 6 different grasses. We're going to look at different ways of distinguishing between the grasses and also the seeds. Then for each of the grass species, we're going to go into the performance features of each one. So that will be why would one grass species perform well in one certain situation and one other may not, or the advantages and disadvantages of each grass. So I hope you enjoy the video and we'll go ahead. Okay, so the first grass species we're looking at is perennial ryegrass. The Latin name is Lolium perenne. First of all, I'd like you to have a look at the image on the left. Perennial ryegrass is a tufted grass species, and can you see it comes from the crown? Everything is sort of sprouting up from one growing point. Have a look at the very base of the crown as well. We have this reddish, sort of pinky purpley stem base, and it's very poignant on ryegrass, particularly in the younger new shoots coming through. Some of the older ones you may need to scratch away and then sort of peel back a layer or two, and you will be able to see the sort of distinct red base. Few other identification features. The youngest leaf is folded. You can see from the image on the right, this was taken during winter sun, quite a low sun, so not a very bright sun. This was actually taken from a Premier League football pitch, but the main thing I'd like you to have a look at here is that the leaves are very shiny. One side of the leaf is dull, and the other side is shiny. It's a very sort of shiny, bright emerald green. Now, one other thing is that if you were to really get into the grass closely, there's something called auricles, and they're sort of like a collar that goes around the stem, and they are present on this grass species. And just referring back to the tufted element, it's a very sort of compact, tight grass that grows. Next two pictures here are of the mature plant, the mature grass plant of perennial ryegrass, Lolium perenne. What you've got here is you've got alternating seeds on the upper part of the plant, one way then the other, and the other. And this image here is of the seed of perennial ryegrass, Lolium perenne. The seed is a medium to large seed, but the distinguishing feature is sort of the stubbiness of it. It's got blunt edges, the ends are sort of rounded, it's quite compact. If you look closely, you can also see sort of a hollow dip within the middle of the seed as well. Some people often say it looks like a hollow tine, or one of the tines that you'd have on a Procore or a vertidrain or implement. But the main thing is it's quite stubby, quite compact seed. What we're going to do now is discuss and talk through performance features of Lolium perenne, perennial ryegrass. I think by far the biggest quality of perennial ryegrass is its ability to withstand wear and tear and ability to recover quickly. You'll often find perennial ryegrass on surfaces that are needed to really recover quickly, such as a golf tee, for example, a golf walkway, football pitches, particularly the goal mouse and the central areas where it's just getting compacted all the time. But if you also think about tennis courts, the baseline of a tennis court, horse racing, cricket run-ups where people are running up on the cricket squares, and rugby pitches where we got a lot of scrummaging, people digging their boots in, lots of people doing side steps and having to put traction on the turf. All of these areas, we need them to recover. We need them to sort of have that resilience to the surface, and perennial ryegrass is perfect for that. Another advantage of perennial ryegrass is that it's very quick to germinate, particularly compared to other grasses. It's quick to establish and grow. And you could say that's actually a negative thing because you're having to mow more often. But in many circumstances, that can be a positive. We looked at an image earlier of a Premier League football pitch, that shiny, deep green colour. It can be a very good performance characteristic of ryegrass. Another one is that it's fairly shade tolerant. Um, it tends to grow well all year round, so in winter it's still recovering in winter. It tends to do well on sort of heavy wet soils compared to very distinctly dry soils. However, in the summer it does have a lot of drought resistance. The plant tends to go dormant. It loses its colour, loses that deep green colour, and will actually survive in quite dry drought conditions. Another last performance feature is it is fairly disease resistant, particularly compared to annual meadowgrass, and combating certain diseases such as microdoping patch or fusarium, very resistant to those types of diseases. Okay, so here we have bent grass. We've got two different bent grasses here actually. On the right hand side we've got brown top bent, Agrostis capillaris, and on the left hand side we've got creeping bent grass, which is Agrostis stolonifera. And it creeps with the stolons, hence why it's called stolonifera. Now one very obvious thing about bent grass is, and an easy way to remember it, is that the grass species does tend to grow bent. It grows sideways, it grows laterally. But if you look particularly at the image on the left hand side, you can see that the leaves really are branching off in sort of one direction than the other. It doesn't tend to grow particularly high, the grass species, or tall, but it will grow sideways. So that's an easy way to remember it being bent grass. The youngest leaves, when they come up, they're rolled in the sheath when they come up. The upper leaf blade is ribbed. I'll show you another image of the ribbing in a moment. That's a little bit closer up. The leaves don't have any hairs on them, and they tend to be a very uniform bluey green dull colour. The tip of the leaf is pointed, almost looks like knives or daggers coming up. They're very sharp in terms of the tip of the leaf. They're not like fescue though, which is very needle-like in terms of the tube that comes up. They tend to be quite broad, bent grass. It tends to be quite broad and then tips up as it comes to the leaf tip, like a sort of a triangle shape. And we'll go on. I'll go on in a moment. Just show you some other images that are a little bit closer up. Okay, we're now looking at a few different things. I'm going to go through them. First of all, the image on the left-hand side for bent grass, you can see it's got the sort of triangular, sharp tip to the leaf. If you have a look a little bit further down to the middle of the leaves, you can see the lines going up and down the leaf. So in this case, in this leaf, they're going sideways, up and down the leaf blade. We call those tram lines. Sort of also another word that people use is that the leaf is ribbed by having those lines up and down. The image on the right hand side is the mature, fully grown bent grass, and you can see the seeds are very small. It comes up sort of a straight spikelet, it's called, and this will be where the seeds conjugate on the top of the surface. This image here is of the seed of bent grass, which you can see is absolutely tiny. There's thousands of seeds within the image here. Um, Almost looks like sort of dust, wood sort of chipping dust. Um, and the main distinguishing feature compared to all the other seeds in this video is that it's very small, almost a tear shape within the seed, and that's the main feature. Okay, so we're going to go through the performance features and advantages of this grass species, bent grass. That's commonly associated with golf greens and the ability to form very dense, uniform, fine textured surfaces under very low mowing heights. So for your luxury lawns, your lawns that you want to be A1 quality, this is the grass species. Although it is expensive to buy the seed and it is expensive to maintain. As mentioned, it has the ability to tolerate low mowing heights. So I thought I'd stress that point by almost putting it in twice there. In terms of ball roll and smoothness across the surface, it's absolutely excellent. If you were to watch a golf ball, for instance, move across the surface, it would be very smooth indeed. You tend to find in the UK that this grass species will be actively growing the most and performing the best in very warm conditions, particularly July and August. It has very high heat tolerance and it grows well during those warmer periods. Due to its creeping nature, through the stolons, bent grass tends to be very self-repairing, so it will fill in areas if there's areas of bare ground, for example. Tends to be quite high in disease resistance, and also the attractive colour of the bent grass with that bluey green, very uniform colour is also an advantage to this grass species. Okay, so we're going to move on to talk about fine fescue grasses, which actually covers more than one species within fescue. So that would include hard fescue, sheep's fescue, chewing's fescue, and creeping red fescue as well. These fine fescue grasses are very difficult to distinguish between them, but they all have similarities and features that are very different compared to the other grasses in this video. For example, the bent grass we've just spoken about, and the ryegrass and the other grasses we're about to come on to in a moment. The main feature of this grass species that really truly separates it from the others is its very spiky, needle, very thin leaf blade. It really is very fine grass, and the word fine fescue really um, there's meaning in those words and why they're called fine fescues. There is an alliteration between the F's there, and I often find it's a good way of remembering that fescues are very fine grass species, very needle-like. The leaf sheath, as it comes up, is shaped like a tube. It's not flat. It is sort of rounded like a tube. If you were to have a look at the image on the right hand side, you can see that it's got very long roots. And fescue roots tend to be longer than other grass species. Um, and the last sort of point I'll make on this slide is that they're very sort of compact and quite dense in terms of how many leaves will come up, so they have a good shoot density. Here are two more images of the fine fescue. The most standout feature again is the needle-like, very fine leaf. The right-hand side image is actually taken from a golf green. The golf green was cut at around 5 to 6 millimeters in terms of height, and it's taken directly looking down on it. The image on the left-hand side was a teeing surface. Again, it's a very needle-like, fine leaf, and if you look quite closely, you can almost see a little bit of yellowing on some leaves. You perhaps don't tend to have that perfect true colour that you might have on your emerald green Lolium perenne ryegrass, or the sort of bluey green of your bent grass, the colour perhaps isn't quite as strong on this grass species as it is on others. Okay, we're now looking at the seed. The seed is quite long. It's roughly about the same size as the perennial ryegrass seed. The main distinguishing feature, though, that is different between this seed and the rye seed is the long, thin, wispy sort of tail, the awn that comes out of one side of the seed. There's many of those in the image here. A very good close-up macro image of the seed, but the main thing is to see that spike. It's almost quite similar to the grass plant itself. It's quite needle-like, quite fine, quite spiky. In terms of performance features of fine fescue grasses, there are many, and we'll go on to those here. The first is probably the leaf blade itself. Because it's so fine, that has a knock-on effect in terms of things like ball roll, the attractiveness of the surface. That fine leaf is a very important aspect of the performance features for it. Very drought resistant, tends to do very well on sandy, dry soils. You'll often find this grass species on the coast, and we have a lot of those here in Kent, particularly golf courses like Royal St George's, Prince's, Royal Cinque Ports. Some of those coastal golf courses have this grass species in abundance. Fine fescues also tolerate low heights of cut. Perhaps they don't perform so well at ultra low heights of cut like 2 or 3 mil, but they do very well at heights of cut like 4 or 5 millimeters in height. As mentioned, the ball roll is very smooth. One thing that's really quite interesting once you get into fescues a lot more is that they're very slow growing. And the knock-on effect of that is particularly important and can save a lot of money, because it will require less maintenance because it's slow growing. So you're not going to have to cut surfaces very often. You're not going to have to put as much fertilizer down. You're not going to have to do as many other practices such as top dressing or aeration, for example, if it's on a sandy soil, which it commonly is. Another distinguishing thing about this grass species is that it's fairly disease resistant to many diseases, and this often is a desirable grass species in the rough on the golf course. Particularly what golf course managers want is that very thin, wispy rough. When you're taking a golf shot as well, you want to have clean contact with the ball. You don't want to have one of those sort of wrist breakers where you've got this thick grass. You want nice, thin, wispy rough, and it's easy to find your ball in as well. And with sort of new rules of golf and the game of golf is evolving over time, the people that make the laws for the sport, the Royal and Ancient, they want people to be playing golf in a reasonable amount of time as well. They don't want 5 hour, 6 hour rounds. They want you to be getting round in time. So finding your golf ball quickly is another benefit of this grass species. They tend to grow well in slightly acidic soils, pH 5 to 6.5. And last thing we've noted there is that it's a very deep root system, which anchors the soil, holds everything in place, but also means that the grass species is very resilient to any environmental changes. Smooth stalk meadowgrass, Perpratensis, very interesting grass species, and we're going to talk about this one now. In terms of the leaf, the emerging leaf is folded, and when you see it from above, you almost can see a V shape, and I'd encourage you to almost look at it from above and try and see that V. You also have a tram lines that are visible on the grass species, a little bit like the bent has the tram lines going up and down. but particularly if you have a look at the very centre, there's almost quite a deep tram line. You can actually see that on the left-hand side of the grass species on the left-hand side, the image. If you look at one or two of the leaf blades carefully, there is one to the middle left where you can almost see a sort of a lime green colour running down the centre of the leaf. That would be the that central channel that within the middle of that V. Um, Very smooth leaf blade, no hairs on the leaf, and the tip of the leaf is quite blunt, and most people say almost looks like a canoe, a boat shape if you look at it um, from sort of turn it sideways on. Now, one interesting thing, if you look particularly at the grass species on the left again, you can see from the crown of one plant, you have these rhizomes which come down from the crown. The rhizomes are sort of almost white in colour and then go underneath the surface and then emerge up with a new leaf. Those are the rhizomes, and they're particularly present with this grass species. On the left and right hand side here, we've got the mature plant, the mature grass plant of the smooth stalk meadowgrass, Parapratensis. They produce a large amount of seeds, a bit like annual meadowgrass, and comes up and almost like a tree how it comes up. Good to recognise the shapes and to be able to distinguish them as well. In terms of seed identification for smooth stalk meadowgrass, it is a very small seed. It's not quite as small as the bent grass. The seed is also a lot smaller than rye and fescue. If you look very closely, it has a little bit of a hollow core in the middle, hollow section, and it's almost triangular, has sort of three sides, and when you roll it in your fingers, you can actually feel each side of the seed. But the main distinguishing feature is that it is larger than bent grass seed and is a lot smaller than rye or fescue seed. In terms of advantages of this grass species, Parapratensis smoothstalk meadowgrass, there are many. Tends to be sort of growing in popularity as well, this seed, over the years. Now it's actually very slow to germinate, first of all, and establish. But once it does establish and germinate, it can form a very thick, dense, thick coverage, particularly due to those rhizomes as well that go beneath the surface. In terms of germination, it can actually take about 3 weeks to germinate, which could be a disadvantage because the seed could blow away, it could get eaten by birds. But once it does establish, it is thick and quite dense. In terms of its wear tolerance, it's actually quite similar to ryegrass. It's very hard wearing. It would perform well on the same sort of areas, things like pathways, golf tees. We talked about the baseline of a tennis court for ryegrass. It would do well there as well. Although perennial ryegrass tends to get a slight preference due to its sort of quick germination and quick establishment compared to Parapratensis. Now the rhizomes can be very good because they stabilise the soil. It's fairly drought resistant as well. The leaf blade is sort of like a bluey green texture and quite a uniform colour again. And one thing that's quite interesting about Parapratensis is that it will grow well on a wide variety of sort of acidic and alkaline sites, and grows particularly well on quite alkaline sites all the way up to pH 8.5. So it is quite interesting from that aspect. Right, so moving on to another grass species now, Poa annua, annual meadowgrass. This is a very common grass species found all over the world, and there's so much of it here in the UK. The youngest leaf is folded as it comes out, almost a bit like a V again, and there are tram lines on the leaf, but then they're not that distinct. You do have to search for them to see them. They tend to have very shallow roots as well, not the longest or deep roots. But one of the main features about them is that they just produce numerous seed heads. You can see from the image on the left hand side, there's so many seeds on this leaf, and it can also have the ability to produce those seed heads at very low mowing heights, even as low as 2, 3, 4 millimeters. It will produce seed heads, which is quite incredible, really. And as far as I know, the only species that will produce those seed heads at such low mowing heights. You can see from the image on the right hand side, the sort of crown, the base of the plant is almost like a whitish colour as well, and it comes up in sort of a sort of a lightish green colour, I'd say. It's not the darkest of green colours, the annual meadow grass. Here we've got another photo of annual meadow grass. It's zoomed in as close as we could get it without it going a little bit fuzzy. But you can see we've got this boat from the image of the leaf on the right hand side. You've got this sort of boat shaped tip, a blunt tip. It's not spiky. It's the tip is rounded and blunt. You can see in the very middle, you can see that the seed head coming up through with so many seed heads on that. If you look closely at the leaf on the left hand side, or to a certain extent the leaf on the right hand side, you can almost see this crinkling. The older leaves tend to come out a little bit crinkled, is the best way to describe that, sort of crinkling. In terms of performance features and advantages of annual meadowgrass, there are many. There will be people out there that say there aren't any at all. But in modern turf world, there are advantages to this grass species. One is that it can tolerate extremely low mowing heights, as low as 2, 3, 4 millimeters. It can tolerate those. And it can, if you look after it well, produce very dense, uniform and fine textured playing surfaces that are very smooth. When those seed heads pop out on the golf green, though, they can look unattractive. They can bobble a little bit. So trying to reduce the seed heads that come out is a huge task for golf course managers to undertake. Another feature is that they invade bare soil very quickly due to the amount of seeds. That can be an advantage, and you could argue that annual meadowgrass in those areas is more beneficial than having a weed, or having a sort of a broad-leafed weed, or having bare soil at all. Another feature is that they tend to grow all year round, apart from when there's a frost. During mild winters, those sort of mild conditions, you will still need to mow your annual meadowgrass surfaces. Now, another feature about the grass is that it's very hungry. It requires quite a bit of irrigation, loads of irrigation in the hot drought periods. And also it tends to require more fertiliser than some of the other grass species, particularly fescue, which doesn't really require too much fertiliser at all. Annual meadowgrass is quite a hungry plant and does require nutrients to grow. We are now looking at a very common grass species, Yorkshire fog. The scientific name for it is Holcus lanatris, as you can see written towards the top of the screen. As I say, it's a very common grass species, but maybe it's not for the best of reasons as well. But we're going to go through the identification features of this one. Now that one of the standout features of this grass species is it has quite a thick, broad leaf, and also, as highlighted on the image here, towards the base of the crown, the sort of part of the stem of the plant, very low to the ground. So this is a very close-up image of the plant. You can see that there are these sort of purpley red lines that go up and down towards the base of the plant, quite distinct from ryegrass, which also has the sort of red purple base to the plant. But here, if you look closely right in the middle of the image, you can see it, but it's more of a sort of has those lines surrounded by the white either side. I'll show you another image on the next slide, which is similar but even more detailed. This image here is, as mentioned, very close-up image, macro image of the very base of the plant, just above the crown. And what's really important to have a look at here is that sort of linear lines that go up and down, that red-purple colour, and it's surrounded by the very white colour. If you look very carefully as well, you can almost see tiny hairs up and down the plant. Another sort of sign of key indicator that it would be Yorkshire fog. This is the last image we're going to show of Yorkshire fog. The main features: very broad leaf, stands out like a sore thumb, to be honest, when you compare it to very finer leaves. It's almost like a limey green colour compared to some of the darker leaves from other turfgrass plants. If you look closely on the leaf, you can also see those very fine hairs, very small, but that there are hairs present on the leaf. In terms of advantages for this grass species, Yorkshire fog, well, to be honest, there really aren't many at all. The only advantage I'd say really was that this grass species would be better than an area of bare ground. It'd be better than having a weed, a broadleaf weed, for example, a thistle, a dandelion, buttercup. It'd be better than those. However, compared to other grass species, it's considered a weed grass. If you had it on a golf green or a golf tee or on a fairway or any sports turf area, it could slow down bull roll because of its thick leaf. It's not attractive. It's not the best of grass species at all. But there we go. Just want to thank you very much for watching the video. Hope you found it very informative. There's quite a lot of aspects we've gone through, so I would encourage you to perhaps even watch it again, try and note down, try and learn all the key facts and scientific names and the features for identifying grass species. But that's all from me. Hope you watch more of the videos, hope you get something out of them, and thank you very much for your time and listening. Thank you.